Braves fans, before you check out this episode of State of the Braves, I just want to let you know that right after I recorded this episode, news came down of Ozzie Albies, very unfortunately out probably 8 weeks. And, obviously we'll see how long he'll actually be out with a fractured left wrist. Just super unfortunate. Recorded the episode before word had come down, so I guess lesson learned on my part. But obviously some of the episode that you will listen to will, maybe some of the content I would change based off of that knowledge. I talk about Nacho Alvarez a lot. I would have before this news, I was talking about Nacho maybe coming up to replace um, Orlando Arcia, who obviously is not performing great right now. But now it looks like he might be coming up to replace Ozzie, and this very unfortunate injury, just another injury in this season that we are trying to get through. And again, maybe the silver lining, Ozzie Albies should be back before the playoffs. But man, 2 months without Ozzie Albies really stinks, and they'll just have to overcome it again. So, again, a lot of this episode will make perfect sense and will feed into unfortunately, will feed into the same theme of Ozzie being out and being injured. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching State of the Braves. I hope you enjoyed this episode. All right, Braves fans, let's go rolling. I'm George McNair, and this is State of the Braves. Well, guys, I have my Hank Aaron shirt on today. I feel like this we need some good vibes as Braves fans. We've entered into the second half of the season. Admittedly, the first half has not gone great in a lot of different ways. For the Braves. Yeah, they're sitting in second place. Most fan bases would probably be okay with that, outside of a few. But, us Braves fans, we have come to expect great things. Of course, last year was so great and just such a fun year. And this year, I don't think has been, I mean, it's had its good moments, its fun moments. I love, of course, sitting down and watching every Braves game still. But this year has been kind of a hard go of it, a lot of injuries. And unfortunately, the second half has, not gotten off to the greatest of starts either. Kind of an inauspicious start today, Sunday. Early this morning, we get news that Max Fried has gone on the injured list, which definitely caused my heart to skip a couple beats. And then the Braves dropped 2 out of 3 to the Cardinals after winning the first game of a doubleheader on Saturday. They dropped the second one, in which the Braves once again call up Bryce Elder to be their 27th man. I really hate when they do this. It almost feels like they're punting the game when they when they do that, or putting the team behind the 8 ball. Let's just be honest. Elder has not been very good since the first half of last year. And again, they drop kind of a dud of a game today, Sunday. Not able to get a lot of offense going. They're hitting some home runs, but a lot of solo shots and not a lot else. So, let's start with some Braves news. The point of this episode, or the focus of this episode today, is definitely going to, I want to review the first half of the year, but also look forward. I don't want to just dwell on the first half, because that would be kind of depressing. There's not a lot of good to think about with the first half outside of the Braves starting pitching and Marcell Ozuna. But we are going to look at that a little bit, try to break it down a little bit, and also look forward to the second half. Hopefully better things will start turning around for the Braves. And I definitely think there is a path forward for the Braves to have a great second half, a lot of success in the playoffs, and who knows, maybe getting back to a World Series and even winning a World Series. That is definitely in the cards, I think, for the Braves. It's certainly not guaranteed. Things don't look like they're going to fall that way right now, but I do think there is a potential for that to happen still for the Braves. All right, so let's get into some Braves news first. Of course, the really big downer of Braves news today is Max Fried goes on the IL with forearm neuritis. Neuritis is basically nerve inflammation. So he was definitely feeling something before he went out and threw that inning in the All-Star game. Yeah, I mean, when I hear that, I'm a little annoyed that he decided to go, pitch in that All-Star game, but I also understand, just from a human standpoint, huge deal for him to make his second All-Star team. He's pitching great. I mean, it wasn't, he said it was just slight discomfort. He felt a little something. It wasn't something that I guess he was too concerned about, but it did continue. After that, they had an MRI. MRI very thankfully revealed no structural issues, but you can be sure that the Braves are going to exercise extreme caution when it comes to Max Fried. They need him. They know they need him healthy for the playoffs. And so the timetable for his return is totally unknown at this point. You read between the tea leaves. On one hand, it doesn't seem like it's something that would keep him out an extended period of time, but you also know they're going to be really careful with it. So who knows when Fried will return? The other side of the coin of this, though, we keep talking about the playoffs. The Braves are going to make the playoffs. The Mets are only 3.5 games back of the Braves. I mean, it is not a given that, there's multiple wild card spots nowadays, but it's not a given. It's not a guarantee that the Braves are going to make the playoffs. So, Fried coming back in a couple weeks would be my hope, but of course we simply don't know that. Some other news: Ian Anderson. If you've forgotten Ian Anderson, he's of course had Tommy John surgery and is working his way back. He has made multiple rehab starts at this point and has made it all the way back to AAA Gwinnett. So he just pitched at AAA Gwinnett, I believe, on Saturday. He didn't perform particularly well in that start. Gave up 4 runs in 3 2/3 innings. He's coming back from Tommy John, so I don't know if we need to be overly concerned about those numbers. It's probably too much to expect from Anderson at this point that he'll contribute a ton to the season. I mean, maybe he can get back in the rotation and give them innings as a fifth starter, as maybe a long man or that sort of thing. We'll just have to be patient with his progress. I certainly think he is a wild card. I mean, Anderson at his best was a tremendous contributor to the Braves 2021 World Series team. It's really the last time that he was really effective. But hey, I mean, if he can be that again, it would be a huge lift to this team. It's just not something we can bank on. I don't think it's something the Braves are banking on. Um, maybe he becomes a little bit more important with this Fried news, but again, hopefully Fried isn't out very long. AJ Smith-Shawver is also working back from his oblique strain and might be ready soon as well. So that's something worth keeping an eye on. A good thing with that is it's not arm issues. So hopefully he will be ready to go soon. And, I would love to see him back in a Braves uniform, maybe pitching. Maybe the Braves could bring him up while Fried is down and then, seamlessly go back to Fried once he's ready. The Braves also, the draft went down, and my last episode was a big breakdown of the draft. I threw out some names of guys that the Braves might draft. I told you guys they might draft someone I'm not even talking about, and that's exactly what they did. I did not talk about the Braves drafting left-handed pitcher Cam Caminiti, and that's obviously who they took, the left-handed prep arm. And one reason I didn't talk about him is I didn't think, and most people didn't think, that he would slide that low in the draft. He was projected more around 12 or 13. The Braves are very fortunate to pick him up with the 24th pick. So very unexpected for him to fall that low. Caminiti was the premier prep lefty in the draft. So before the draft, I really expected the Braves to break with recent trends and go with a position player in the first round. For years, basically under Anthopoulos, they've taken pitchers all but 1 year. They did that. And where they were picking at 24, it just seemed like there were going to be more college hitters and maybe even a couple pretty good high school position players that they could have taken. But when Caminiti fell to them at 24, they jumped at the chance to take him. Caminiti is only 17 years old, already has a mid-90s fastball, has pretty solid secondary pitches. Maybe those are a little weaker than his fastball right now, but again, he's only 17. Incredibly athletic. If that name sounds familiar, he is the cousin, obviously a much younger cousin of Ken Caminiti, the late MLB All-Star. I believe Ken Caminiti won an MVP. Also kind of known for some steroid use, and I think he had some substance abuse and struggles later in his life, very sadly, passing away at a young age. But the cousin of Ken Caminiti. So he has those bloodlines. And, it's hard to find anybody not saying that this might have been the steal of the draft. So that is very exciting. Some other notable picks that the Braves took. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the draft, um, but wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about it, wrapping that portion of the season up for the Braves. So their second round pick, left-hander Carter Carter Holton. So Holton, has a unique delivery. He's coming out of Vanderbilt as a lefty. Unique delivery, undersized at 5'11". Some teams kind of shy away from smaller pitchers like that. That was kind of notable with Spencer Strider. Not that Holton is necessarily Spencer Strider, but the Braves tend to lean into some of these smaller pitchers. And so even though Holton has some doubters, he can throw mid 90s. He's got real stuff. He's got a great slider from the left side. So there's a lot of big upside to this guy, but I think a lot of people think there's a lot of reliever risk as well. And again, so that's why some teams have shied away from him. But, as their second round pick, a lot of talent. Of course, Vanderbilt is a great baseball school. So this will be interesting to keep an eye out on him. Third round pick for the Braves was right-handed pitcher Luke Sennard out of Indiana. He actually set some Indiana records for strikeouts in a season. That was in 2023. He blew out his elbow at the end of 2023, so he spent all this past season um, just rehabbing that. But also kind of a unique guy, kind of over the top thrower. He's 6'8", so a really big dude as well. So he's another one to keep an eye out for. Their fifth rounder, they finally went with a position player, Nick Montgomery, a catcher. He is a uh, high school player out of Cypress High School in California. He's a big guy for for being 18, 6'4". He's a massive dude, but again, only 18, and a lot of teams seem to be questioning whether he can stick at catcher. If he gets too big, maybe unathletic and that sort of thing. But the Braves think he can stay there. He has real power that's showing up already at 18 years old, and has homered against some really good competition as he's gotten onto the prep circuit and that sort of thing. So I really like this pick, even though they didn't take a ton of top level position players. I really do like this guy. Um, but yeah, in the first 10 rounds, Montgomery was the Braves' only position player pick, but he looks really talented. In the 12th round, they picked a right-handed pitcher, came in good. This is another prep arm that the Braves took. He is out of Freeman High School in
What?
Virginia. Good is just another really talented prep arm, and this time from the right side, good fastball, good feel for his slider and curve. So real potential there. And then finally in the 20th round, outfielder Eric Hartman. This guy is also a high schooler, but he is out of Canada. He's probably the least likely player to sign that the Braves drafted. Again, in the very last round, they basically took a flyer on this guy. He is committed to Michigan, so it's maybe more likely that he just goes on to Michigan. But if the Braves are able to put enough money on the table for him, maybe an overslot, they could sign him away. So there's at least a possibility of that. He's a real toolsy outfielder, known for a really high character. So, sometimes the Braves get lucky on guys like this. They obviously are a great organization with a really good track record. So if he wants to enter the Brave system, maybe they're able to get him, and it could be a steal. But yeah, my overall thoughts for the draft, obviously landing Caminiti, really means that this draft class is more top heavy than most Braves draft classes. It really flips what they usually do. Usually they'll go underslot with their first round pick. That allows them to get a little more aggressive with their picks in the second, third, fourth, fifth rounds. So not as much this year, maybe. So it really relies a little bit more on Caminiti to land and succeed. So if he succeeds this draft, I think looks really great. If he flames out, maybe it looks like a little bit of a weaker draft as we move forward. But you also never know with drafts. I mean, multiple guys in this draft for the Braves could surprise us, come out of nowhere. It's also a class that will likely we Braves fans will not likely not see the impacts of for a while, for a few years. A lot of the best talent for the Braves in this draft are coming out of high school, which is a little different than in more recent drafts. So we might have to wait 2, 3, 4, even 5 years for some of these guys, even though they're pretty talented. All right, so let's move on to the main focus of this episode as we move beyond the draft, beyond the All-Star break. Let's review the Braves' first half and preview the Braves' second half. So at present, we are, this is Sunday afternoon after Sunday games. The Braves are 8.5 games back of the Phillies. It definitely feels like the Braves have just recently squandered an opportunity to pick up at least some momentum on the Phillies. The Phillies are only 9-7 in July, so of course they still have the best record in the National League, but 9-7, a little bit of a downturn from what they'd been doing. But the Braves, at the same time, have only managed an 8-8 record, so the Phillies have actually picked up a game in July instead of the Braves maybe picking up a couple games here. They could have done that as of late. Going forward, the Phillies have the seventh toughest schedule remaining on the season. Sorry, the Braves have the seventh easiest schedule. Sorry, I misspoke there. The Braves have the seventh easiest schedule remaining um, of any team in baseball, while the Phillies have the sixth toughest schedule remaining. So it does set up, at least on paper, decently for the Braves to make a run. But we also know that the Phillies are not a pushover team. This doesn't seem like a team that's just going to fold. So the Braves are probably just going to have to run them down, right? Just play so well, similar to how the Braves, beat the Mets a couple years ago. They had to run them down. The Mets really, I mean, the Mets didn't play great down the stretch, but they didn't really fold. The Braves had to beat them, had to run them down. So I kind of expect that this season as well. But I just wanted to, for Braves history, this is not unprecedented. A reminder that it certainly can happen. We will remember 1993. The Braves, of course, very famously acquire Fred McGriff at the trade deadline. At the time, the Braves were 9 games back of the Giants in late July. McGriff arrives. Of course, famously, the press box catches fire that night. McGriff hits a big home run, and the Braves also caught fire as they went an astonishing 51-17 after that, won the NL West. Back then, they were in the NL West by 1 game over the Giants, who won 103 games and went home. That's, of course, that was the season before the wild card. Many people think that's why the wild card was created, because the Giants won 103 games with nothing to show for it. Then, of course, in 2021, there wasn't another great team the Braves were necessarily trying to run down in 2021. But August 1st, the Braves were 52-55, and they finished the season 36-18. They, of course, all the guys at Anthopoulos went out and got at the trade deadline that year, basically rebuilt the outfield, and they blitzed through the postseason, win the World Series. Before the trade deadline, there wasn't much about that team that looked like a World Series team, a team that might win the World Series, and then they did. So just constantly reminding myself of that. Again, it doesn't guarantee us anything of this season, but recent history tells us that it's absolutely possible for this team to right the ship, find a groove, and really start playing well. And maybe Anthopoulos making some key additions at the trade deadline might be a part of that as well. But the uncertainty of Fried's elbow injury definitely looms large right now. Of course, Michael Harris's return in a positive way looms large. That does seem to be on the horizon. He's not back yet, but whenever Michael Harris does return, it will be a really welcome sight. Right now we're about 10 days away from the trade deadline. So these are definitely important times for the Braves. So once again, Alex is going to be a very important part of whatever the Braves might be able to accomplish this year. Can he pull the right strings again at the trade deadline? And can the Braves be healthy and peak by the end of the year? Those are big questions that are certainly unknowns right now. One thing that has to turn around is the Braves offense. We all know it. and they know it. They know that the offense has underperformed this year, and it has made watching the Braves obviously a little less enjoyable. Again, 2023 was so fun, such a fun team because they were just a historic offense. But the offensive regression compared to 2023 is real. Um, who are the biggest culprits, and who isn't, right? Who isn't to blame? I don't want to get in too much of a blame game and get too negative, but I do want to talk about a few guys that the Braves really need them to turn it around in a big way in the second half. And if any of them do it, it's going to be a huge boost. If all of them do it, it's going to be a really fun second half. All right, so the first guy and kind of my number one guy to throw some blame on for the offensive downturn, and of course we're not talking about injuries, we're just talking about performance here, and that is Matt Olson. So Olson has really been a shell of himself, um, of his 2023 self, right? 1 year ago, Matt Olson was probably in most years would have won an MVP for what he did in 2023. He was slid down to the 5 hole just today in the lineup. And while Riley was able to find his adjustment, of course, he went through a lot of struggles as well. But Riley was able to fix whatever was wrong with his swing when he started the season. He was able to adjust and fix it. And Olson just still looks totally lost at the plate. Not just lost, but incredibly frustrated. It's like every time he hits a fly ball, he's got his head down. He is every time he strikes out. You can just see it on his face. And look, Olson was so good last year, good enough as far as Fangraphs is concerned. A 6.5 FWAR season for Olson last year. Of course, 54 home runs. He is currently, according to Fangraphs, having a 0.1 FWAR season. 0.1. He's hitting in the 220s. Of course, only 13 home runs. His power outage has been very obvious, especially as of late. For his career, Matt Olson has been a very every other year kind of guy. I mean, you just look at his career numbers, it's like a big wave up and down performance. A great year followed by kind of a down year. But this is the most extreme of that, right? He had his greatest season of his career last year, and now he's having basically the worst season of his career right now. And he and the coaches have to identify, okay, something's different. Something's off with your swing. Something's off with your timing. And I have no doubt that they are scouring. They're trying to figure that out. But they obviously haven't yet. And I just hope they're able to do that. I always push back against, going back to the Freddie Freeman thing and all that. But the only reason I bring that up is when Matt Olson came to Atlanta, the one thing that I knew was true when you had Matt Olson, when Matt Olson was coming and Freddie was leaving, is Freddie Freeman is the most consistent hitter in baseball, probably. Consistent excellence. The height of Freddie Freeman might not be as high as Matt Olson, but he's just super consistent. Whereas Matt Olson is up and down, and he had been before he came to Atlanta. Of course, his first year was okay, not great. Second year was tremendous. And then third year, of course, here's the downturn again. So that's what we have, and I hope that Olson is able to overcome that and kind of maybe he can have 2 great seasons after this one and kind of put that to bed. But right now, it's just the truth of his career. So look, um, one interesting measure that immediately stands out if you go to Olson's Baseball Savant page is his squared up percentage. Olson is only in the 5th percentile in squaring up the ball. In all baseball, he's only in the 5th percentile, which totally tracks for me. The bottom 5th percentile, that is. It totally tracks for me. Olson, it just seems like rarely squares up balls. That's basically all he was doing last year was hitting balls on the nose. Even his home runs seem softer, right? Even his home runs are going about 40, 50 feet less than they did last year. It's just something isn't quite right with his swing to square the ball up like he needs to. While in 2023, Olson's chase rate was at 69%, and his whiff rate was at 30%. This year, his chase rate is a lot worse at 43%. His whiff rate's about the same, but he is definitely chasing a lot more as well. That might just be due to his frustration and trying to do more, but this also tracks with what I'm seeing. Olson is chasing a ton of pitches on the corners that you're probably not going to do a ton of damage with, and especially off the plate inside, he's chasing that a lot. Now, a lot of times he'll foul it off, but he's just being less patient to get to good pitches and in good counts this year. I think there's something wrong mechanically with Olson's swing that is causing these problems, but as of now, he doesn't seem very capable of finding those adjustments. One thing I do know from Chipper Jones, he's talked about Olson's swing before, is Olson's swing, there's a lot of moving parts. It's a lot more complicated swing than some of the other Braves. And of course, that's a negative. I mean, when it's working great, it obviously he's all world, but there's a lot of things to do to get sequenced right, to get that timing right. And of course, it just hasn't been there this year. All right, so another guy who's clearly struggling and needs to turn around the second half is Ozzie Albies. You know, when healthy, Ozzie has been an incredibly consistent 30 home run, 100 RBI guy, but that is not Ozzie this season. Ozzie's slugging percentage is down 110 points from last year. That's crazy. And why is that? Look, I really think it's an injury. Remember he had that toe injury, the broken toe. He goes down, actually is back pretty quickly, kind of surprisingly quickly. And a broken toe doesn't just magically heal that quickly. So I think he basically got to a point where he can say, I can play with this. I don't want to be on the IL. And, it's just going to heal as it heals. But, I really think that's it, because you look at all of his numbers, all of his percentages, Baseball Savant page, everything's pretty close to the same, but his hard hit percentages are way down, meaning he's swinging, missing about the same. His K rate's about the same. His walk rate's about the same. He's just hitting the ball less hard than usual. And Ozzie's never had great bat speed. He's always been in the lower percentiles with that, especially from the left side. So he really lives on the ability to find the barrel. And I think he's just not been able to find the barrel as often. Ozzie's hitting 30 points lower against righties this year than he did last year, and he's hitting 50 points lower against lefties than he did last year. Of course, he's always been known as just a tremendous hitter against lefties, and he still is. He's hitting 343 against lefties this year, but he hit 390 against them last year. So all this just makes me think that there's something physically that is limiting him, right? He's able to play, but it's limiting him some. But hopefully he can start turning that around. It's hard to know. If it is physical, it's going to be hard for him to just magically turn it on. And then finally, my third guy is Orlando Arcia. And in some ways, Arcia, I'm just going to put him in as the representative for the bottom of the order. I'm going to talk more about this in this episode. The Braves' bottom of the order is definitely not been anywhere close to what it was last year. But Arcia in particular, I've talked about him a good bit, so I don't want to beat a dead horse. But from a glance, Arcia's approach is way too aggressive. He's swinging at everything and trying to basically crush the ball with every swing. In the first half of 2023, he, of course, was hitting around 300, and he cut his swing down a ton. And, especially in two-strike counts, he was willing to go up the middle and the other way a good bit more, and clearly just kind of a base hit approach with two strikes. Hitting at the bottom of the order, that's really all he needs to do, right? If you can imagine Orlando Arcia, who's playing at still a pretty high level defensively, just hit, let's say he was hitting 270, right? Even just sacrificing some power to get on base a little bit more often, that would be fine. But of course, it's not what he's doing. That's not his approach. Believe it or not, Arcia has actually been unlucky, or sorry, he has been lucky, according to Baseball Savant. His expected batting average is in the lowest 2% of baseball. He's hitting around 211. His expected batting average is 198. So the only positive number for Arcia, it's actually pretty ugly if you go to his Baseball Savant page. The only positive number for Arcia is his squared up percentage. When he hits the ball, he does hit it hard, but he chases a lot. He has a high whiff rate and he has a terrible walk rate. So there's just very little positive to talk about with Arcia's offensive game right now. His chase rate, K rate, whiff rate, and walk rate were all much better last year. Again, when he wasn't swinging for the fences all the time, he had a different approach for sure. If he can be a little more patient of a hitter, he can get to being an average hitter. Remember, he had kind of a career year last year, and he had a WRC plus of 99, basically meaning he was a totally average hitter last year. But that's okay if you are an above average defensive shortstop. But when he chases and when he basically has the approach that he has had this year, he is a bad offensive player, and that's just been the case this year. And he's just not been good at all. So those three guys, if those three can turn the tide, right, turn it around a little bit in the second half, obviously, obviously it's going to help the Braves play a lot better offensively. Now, who's not to blame? I'm going to put two particular players in here. Marcell Ozuna obviously is at the top of the list of who's not to blame for the Braves' slow offensive season thus far. I don't think Ozuna is going to slow down. He's playing terrific. It's an incredible career renaissance for Ozuna, a guy in his mid 30s. And honestly, it all but guarantees that he's going to be back next year for the Braves. Remember, he has an option on his contract. That's something that seemed impossible early last year. We, including me, I'll put it on myself as well, calling for the Braves to release Marcell Ozuna. He was playing so bad, and of course, it had some off the field issues too, and he has just turned it around in a big way. And Marcel's metrics are off the charts. He is exceeding nearly every metric compared to last season, which was arguably his best offensive season of his career. He has improved his chase and walk rates from last year, being even more selective and swinging at pitches that he can do damage on. Marcell is on pace for 46 home runs and 130 RBIs. He's being talked about as a top 5 MVP candidate, which is really something for any DH. And Marcell Ozuna definitely deserves those praises. Austin Riley, and I would say he is not to blame either. At least now, he had a terrible first 2 months, 2.5 months of the season, but he has turned it around. So he was going to be on that list for guys to blame, but I can't put him on there now. From June 14th to today, Riley has hit 318 with 10 home runs. And that's something considering he only had 3 home runs before that. Right now, he's hitting for the season 258 with 13 home runs on the year. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Riley is going to rebound back and be able to hit 30 home runs for the season. Didn't think that was going to be possible only a month ago. And I'd say he'll finish around 270. If he hits 270 with 30 home runs, it's a little bit of a down year compared to what he's done in the past, but it's pretty impressive compared to how slow he started this season. So right now it feels like the offense is Ozuna, Riley, and an occasional other guy who might step up on a given night. Like yesterday it was Rosario. He had a home run in each of the 2 games. And then today it was Kelnick had a home run. But it's just kind of random. Without Acuna and with Olson lost at the plate, the Braves have to find an outfielder who can move the needle at the trade deadline. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But, not just a guy who's a little better than what we have, but a guy that's really going to come into this lineup and be a difference maker. With that kind of guy and hopefully a fully healthy Michael Harris coming back, okay, now you can start to see how the offense could get back to at least a top 10 offense. They've been middle of the road. They're about 15th, maybe even a little lower than that now. And they need to get back on track. So the real impact of the first half injuries, it can't be overstated. I don't really want to spend a lot of time on it, but I certainly want to mention it. You can't blame the guys that are playing and without mentioning that at all, it's hard to quantify the impact of losing both Spencer Strider and Ronald Acuna for the year. No other team has had two superstars like that go down. The extended absence of Michael Harris has also hurt. And of course, there have been some other injuries like Sean Murphy and others that have really hurt the Braves as well. But, Spencer Strider goes down on April 5th. Ronald Acuna goes down on June 26th. Michael Harris goes down on Acuna went down on May 26th, and then Harris goes down on June 14th. It just, of course, Harris will hopefully be back soon, but it just underscores the incredibly important offseason additions that Anthopoulos made. Chris Sale and Ronaldo Lopez to the starting rotation, Jared Kelenic to the outfield. Imagine if those guys had not been added, the impact of these injuries. The Braves really might be buried if not for the additions of those guys. But the truth is, the Braves have still really been only treading water since Acuna went down and are still in need of a replacement right fielder and probably starting pitcher as well in the interim, right? They haven't really been able to act to replace a Strider or replace an Acuna. And of course, we are coming up on the trade deadline, and now's the time. If you're going to do it, now's the time. And of course, those additions really are probably rentals because you have Strider coming back long term, you have Acuna coming back long term. But if we're talking about this season and impacting this season, something needs to happen. So, okay, what has to change? We've talked about some of the negatives of the first half. We kind of all know them. But what has to change in the second half? And I think there's two big things that the Braves can do to fix things and really get moving back towards contending for a World Series. Number one is to fix the bottom of the order, primarily by fixing the outfield in the short term. Okay, so the bottom of the order, of course, is Arcia, Rosario, and Duvall right now. And you could throw in some of the other outfielders, like Laureano played today for Duvall, because basically Duvall can't hit right-handed pitching. But, all that is kind of put together. So Arcia, of course, is not an outfielder, but he's going to go into this group as like bottom of the order guys. So Arcia, Rosario, and Duvall as a group for the year. This is kind of shocking, guys. In terms of Fangraphs WAR, those three combined have combined FWAR of negative 2.0. Now, of course, Rosario did most of that negative with the Nationals, okay? But I'm still talking about what they've done as a group performance-wise, and this is who the Braves are hitting 7, 8, and 9 in the order. And they just have been really bad, especially offensively. And a combined batting average with those three of 196. So look, while it probably isn't a surprise that Eddie, since he's come back, has played pretty well for the Braves. That it is cool and it's nice to see him back, and he's hit a couple home runs, but he still is playing well below average defensively this year. Now, what is surprising is Adam Duvall actually has graded out even worse than Eddie Rosario defensively this year. And, you want to blame Duvall basically had no spring training. So maybe that's a big part of it. But he's having by far his worst defensive year by Fangraphs metrics. Of course, Arcia's offensive downturn, you'd be able to stomach that a lot more because of his good defensive value at a premium position if the 7 and 8 hitters in the lineup were hitting really well, right? If you just had one guy hitting ninth who's hitting 211 and playing a really good shortstop, okay, I can stomach that, right? But it's not the case. So you just field a little bit better. Now, of course, Michael Harris is coming back hopefully soon, and he's going to fill one of those spots. So that immediately is an upgrade. But you still need to find an everyday right fielder, and that really should be Anthopoulos' priority. I'll keep repeating this other thing, which I really don't know if the Braves are going to do it at all, but I'm just going to keep beating this drum. Nacho Alvarez is in AAA right now, playing shortstop, and is just tearing the cover off the ball. In 27 games at Gwinnett, he's hitting .342 with 7 home runs and 24 RBIs with a .425 on base percentage. I mean, again, guys, I know it's AAA, but compare that to what Orlando Arcia is doing. And at the same time, he's doing it all primarily as a shortstop, 25 out of 27 games at shortstop for Gwinnett. So that's the one unanswerable I don't know about totally. Is he ready defensively to play shortstop at the big league level? But he obviously is a tremendous upgrade offensively compared to Arcia. I mean, 7 home runs in 27 games. This is a guy who basically the power tool was the lowest coming up as a prospect, and he's very quickly really tapped into some power. So, man, I really hope the Braves would be bold enough to bring him up, but just simply don't know if that's going to be part of their solution moving forward. Um, I'll bring him up one more time before before the end of this episode, but that's one other solution I hope that they tap into. So again, my number one thing to fix in the second half is to fix the bottom of the order. Again, primarily with the outfield, but also maybe with shortstop with Nacho Alvarez as well. My number two thing is that for the Braves to lock in and to lock in with their starting pitching. It's time to stop calling up Bryce Elder and others for spot starts to give extra rest to the rotation. I'm constantly frustrated by this. They did it again in the Cardinals series. You know, they're able to bring up a 27th man when you have a doubleheader, and they almost always do it and use it for a spot start to give guys extra rest. I totally get the long-term reason to do that. I haven't really been against it up to this point, but I've really reached my max of like, okay, guys, if we want to win the NL East, it's time to lock in and let's go for it. And maybe they're kind of to that point as well. Obviously, losing Freed, even if it's just for a couple weeks, complicates that a little bit. But maybe it means Anthopoulos goes out and gets a fifth starter at the trade deadline. I don't know, but I think it's time to shelve that. Unfortunately, I don't think Elder is going to turn it around this season. I hate that for him, but he just hasn't really shown much. Um, maybe Smith Shawver is ready to go and healthy. Schwellenbach's been good, maybe not great, but okay. But I would love for them to maybe find some other option out there on the trade market to boost their starting pitching, especially with Freed going down. But yeah, no more of this spot start call up stuff. I'm really kind of sick of it. Time to lock in. So again, if you add Michael Harris, Nacho Alvarez, and then any above average right hitting outfielder that's on the trade market, add anybody, right, to the lineup like that, this offense would be totally different, right? It would be totally remade. And, if we just pray that Freed isn't out for long, um, and it doesn't, at least on paper, doesn't sound terrible, doesn't sound that bad. So we'll just pray that that's the case. I'll stay positive with that, right? If those things happen, I totally do see a path for this team to get back to its winning ways and towards another playoff run. So, look, we'll see. I have a lot of faith in Alex Anthopoulos to go out and do the things necessary to put this team in a position to win. Obviously, I think this year he's had to overcome a lot more roster-wise, but I'm really curious to see how the Braves play out these next 10 days or so before the trade deadline. So, guys, tune in with me. It's going to be really interesting to see that, and I just appreciate you tuning in. I'll talk to you soon.